Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast. Big day in Foxborough, and I did have an opportunity after the main press conference, which you've by now listened to a great portion of it, to speak to Mike Vrabel one-on-one and ask a few more pointed and direct questions about his plans for the Patriots in 2025. So have a listen here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the new head coach of the New England Patriots, Mike Vrabel. You seem incredibly comfortable today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think having done it, but then also being here, I think that the comfort level, you know, when you stand up there and you recognize half of the media.
Can you keep the mic up to you?
Sorry. Everybody else gave me like something I didn't have to hold. But anyways, no, I am excited and comfortable all at the same time.
You know, the last two early Januaries, this is about how many people have been in the stands for the final game of the year. You're going to be able to correct that in January?
Well, that's certainly our hope. I mean, we want to play meaningful games towards the end of the season. I think the one thing that I've taken from not only the teams that we had in Tennessee, but successful teams is they've gotten better as the season has gone on. And we saw that maybe in the Baltimore and the Pittsburgh game, that one team has continued to improve, and the other one was still kind of trying to find itself late in the season. So that's something that we believe in, that we're going to believe strongly in, and understand that it is a long season. And how do we make sure that the players are engaged and continue to improve as the season goes on?
You did what I thought was a really good story with The Athletic, and you laid out three primary things that you were looking for. One of them was either a pathway to a very good quarterback or the presence of a very good quarterback. So I ask you, would you be here or have been as interested if not for Drake May?
I think it was the total package. I think that certainly had a lot to do with it. And I thought, I enjoyed that article. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed seeing it. I thought Zach did a great job. But I think it is the total package. And I can't say that if he was or wasn't here, he is here. And I'm excited to put a great staff around him and begin coaching him and getting to know him and seeing what he can do to help us.
I got to circle back to the question I asked you in the big press conference, and that's on coordinators. You have an opportunity here because of his presence to look at either established guys who've been coordinators in the NFL, guys who've been mentioned like Tommy Rees. There is kind of an open playbook. How will you vet them?
Easy. I be able to interview them. I've got plenty of time here in the next week or so, and as I have a list of guys that I'm excited to reach out to and see if their availability. And the important thing is that, you're putting a lot of different styles around our players, right? And so that they complement me, I complement them, their personalities. You don't want, you're going to laugh, 15 Mike Vrabels walking around. No. Like nobody can handle that, especially me. But you're just trying to get the right fit. And again, the X's and O's are there's no perfect play, but it's what the players understand, what they can execute, what they believe in, and what allows them to play with some speed and some aggressiveness.
The other aspect that you mentioned, aside from ownership, was having a shared vision with the personnel people, being able to feel like they understand what I'm looking for, I understand what they're going to bring me, we're all on the same page. Looking at really not just this past season with talent acquisition in the draft and free agency, but in previous years, it has not been great. They just haven't brought in enough good players. How comfortable are you that this group is going to be headed by Eliot to identify good players?
Yeah, very. And I think that, having talked to Eliot, I think that, and getting to know him through the interview process and then, some over the weekend, there were some things that maybe didn't allow him to completely invest in personnel. And I'm not going to be able to watch every player. I'm not going to be able to watch as many players as they will. And I'm excited about them being able to consolidate that, to get me the players, to get me in front of the players that we need to identify and evaluate, and allow me to coach the football team and then, come together with a shared vision about who can help us. And then, part of that is also developing them. I mentioned that. I believe in that, teaching them, developing them, and then inspiring them, through a connection. So whatever they've done, whatever they did last year, that was last year, and we're going to give them an opportunity to prove their value this year to the football team.
Every organization, and you mentioned it in your initial remarks, every organization has a culture to it. The culture over the last few years here has been candidly a little dysfunctional. There've been some silos here. Mayo talked about knocking them down. It wasn't really as successful as hoped. You want to galvanize this franchise.
I have to. Yeah, I believe that.
Is that a primary goal?
One of the most important things that I'll do is right now is making sure that I meet with every department and hear what they have to say, hear the things that they like, the things that they don't like. And again, I believe that the number one job that I'll have throughout this team and this staff is about listening. Mm-hmm. Listening with the intent to understand and not listening with the intent to respond. And I think when you listen with the intent to understand someone's position, it doesn't matter whether I agree or disagree with you. I need to know how you feel. And then how can I help you do your job? Are you want to enhance it? What are your areas of focus? How do we make it better?
It's been a culture of blame laying, to be honest. And
you're going to have to blame me. Like I'm ready to accept the blame, and I'm ready to give credit. Like that's where I'm at in my career. I want to try to help young coaches. I want young players to win. I want young players to develop. Outside of winning, there's no greater feeling for a coach than to have a young player go from one level to another level. And you see when you set the hook and the light goes off, like they'll die for you. Like you just want to teach them one thing that can help them do their job, and you can coach them as hard as you want.
And that's basically what you talked about too. You've been at every stage, every level. Last question: are you surprised that Michael Felger has risen to the king of all Boston media?
It's unreal. Like some things never change. I just was shocked at how low his shirts are unbuttoned now these days. I mean, it's 15 degrees out, and his shirt's down like a couple buttons too low.
It's a lot of things to adjust to.
We'll figure that out.
Bringing in Phil Perry now. Phil, second time in 12 months, we're introducing a new head coach. I'm going to be very organized and categorical with this interview. First off, coordinator leanings. It sounds as if Mike is going to try to vet all the coordinator candidates, hire the one that has the best fit for him, for the quarterback, and for the team in general. Got any idea who that might be?
My guess is it's either Tommy Rees or Josh McDaniels on the offensive side. Tommy Rees, tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns, just interviewed actually for the Cleveland Browns. Open offensive coordinator position. Would make a lot of sense. Younger guy, coordinator at the college level, would speak the same language that Drake May spoke with Alex Van Pelt this past year because Rees worked under Stefanski as Van Pelt did. And then there's McDaniels, who to me would make a lot of sense. If you're at all worried, Tom, about the possibility of bringing in a young coordinator like Tommy Rees, having that guy have success with your good young quarterback and then watching him leave for a head coaching job in a year or two. I think Josh McDaniels, you're probably expecting him to stick around a little bit longer and maybe build more of a foundation with your young QB.
Yeah, and I think people would look at Josh and say, well, is he going to want to go try and be a head coach someplace else? At this juncture, he still lives here in suburban Boston, and his family's here, and I think that he really desires an opportunity to sink those roots back in here. And if the opportunity is right, if the setup is right, I think that he would then be amenable to joining the Patriots. And if you look at it, there's proximity, there's familiarity with Vrabel, there's a good young quarterback to work with. It's just what's his role, what's the expectation, how much will he be paid? Not that I think that makes a big difference, but I guess the commitment, the literal commitment as opposed to a monetary commitment. How are we doing this? Because I'm guessing, and we didn't get into this at all, and I'm kind of blindsiding you with this, but to convince Mike Vrabel to come here, the Patriots needed to articulate a level of stability, don't you think? That he will be able to instill. You heard it during that one-on-one that I had, that he's looking to galvanize this franchise. It is unstable right now. How long do you think it will take the Patriots to become a stable franchise?
I don't think you can be a stable franchise until you have enough in the way of personnel on the field to allow you to contend. Because you and I could be in the locker room and could listen to every single word that Mike Vrabel says and try to work as hard as we possibly can and know everybody's name in the building, from the people who work in the cafeteria to the janitorial staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and do all those things, those intangible things that Mike Vrabel wants. But we can't play. Team's going to lose 17 games with you and me out there. So it's all well and good to have a set of standards, and you need to have those. It's all well and good to have a strong culture and a clearly stated direction, which Mike Vrabel will bring, and that matters. But until they become a more talented football team, it's going to ring hollow. How long does it take to be a better football team would be my question in response to your question. 2 seasons?
Yeah, better football team, a competent football team. As I said a million times after the Mayo hire, this team needs to ooze competency by January, and that was one of the first questions I asked Vrabel in that one-on-one. This is basically how the stadium has looked the last 2 Januaries for the final game of the season. How do you make sure that we don't see so many empty seats next time? He says we have to be better at the end of the year. To be better at the end of the year, you have to have imported good players. This is the biggest talking point. This is the biggest area of concern for you, for me, for Joe Sports fan, for everybody, because the personnel aspect is the only thing that matters. We would be willing participants on the Patriots this year, as you pointed out. We're not good. And unfortunately, some of the players that Eliot Wolf, Matt Groh, and the personnel people have brought in continue to be not good. I asked Vrabel that pointed question about it in the one-on-one. They haven't brought in good players. What's the deal with that? But do you think Eliot Wolf is over, parallel to, or subservient to Mike Vrabel and his vision?
I think it's going to be the last thing. He might technically have final say on the roster, and that may be the case not only through the draft, but for the rest of this season, and for who knows how long after that. But I think he would understand that his job security is tied to the success of the team, and the success of the team is tied to his ability to marry up, his ability to find players that fit whatever it is that Vrabel wants out there on the field.
What do you think he wants offensively? You looked at me when he said X plays, which was shorthand for explosive plays.
X play.
And he talked and he also talked about aggressiveness without being incautious.
Reckless.
That was incautious. Is that even a word?
English major.
Be that as it may. Shut up. We spent a lot of time up at St. A's. They spent, I don't know, my parents probably spent $30,000 in 4 years going to that school back in the 80s. That was a pretty penny at the time. But do you think that he has a meat? I don't have a problem if the Patriots walk into 2025 and say, sorry, folks, we're a meat and potatoes football team until further notice. I know you people think that Drake May is the second coming, and he may well be. But he is going to have to walk around in sandals for a little while here because we just don't have the artillery to be pew, 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 pew. Explosive.
So what does he want his offense to be? I think he's going to cede in large part his offensive outlook to whoever his coordinator is. So if it's Josh McDaniels and Josh McDaniels is used to building an offense that suits the personnel that they have, if Drake May's your best player, you got to put in his hands a lot. And so that could be.
But what if your tight ends are your best receivers?
Okay, means getting it out of his hands quickly too.
And your running backs are of a certain style where they're pounders, and you don't have a third down back.
Well, can the offensive line move anybody at all? Because if they can't,
it comes down to.
You're having a pounding running back that gets you what they had this past year, which is not much.
We have a pounding running back and 2 giant tight ends, and we have it's not a pop
and a quarterback with a good arm. And listen, I thought it was nice to hear from Vrabel today about just how efficient and explosive he wants to be, specifically with the passing game. And they were that at times in Tennessee. And he had good coordinators and Matt LaFleur and Arthur Smith, and they got a lot at times out of Ryan Tannehill. But he's never really had a young quarterback of Drake May's ilk, at least. And I thought what he expressed today was an acknowledgement of the fact that he's already one of their best players, and whatever they do is going to feature a heavy dose of that guy, number 10.
My favorite quote, there were 2 favorite quotes, but the one that was pertinent to football that I preferred was, I'm going to screw this up, but.
We want to be good enough to take advantage of bad football?
Thank you. Yeah, That was my
Was that
favorite.
it?
My other one was, because I think I'm guilty of getting these two confused sometimes. There's a difference between interesting and important. If you listen to this podcast, there's a lot of things that I find interesting that are not important. That's why we get to 35 minutes instead of cutting it off at 28. And folks, the ideal podcast is about 35 minutes. I know there's plenty of podcasts out there that go on for 2 hours and 10 minutes. 35 minutes is bite-sized, get you in, get you out.
You got a lot of people in the 42-minute club out there that have been in the 42-minute club for about 10 years that are looking at themselves. So what the hell I've been a proud member of the 42-minute club for? This guy's going to sit there and tell me 35 is just fine.
The 42-minute club only came about because we were under a strict – we had, like, analytics, which were done up by one guy probably who had no information about podcasts in general, saying, these have to be shorter because we were doing like an hour. And it was supposed to be a half an hour. We got up to 42 a couple times. Those were the days.
Those were the days. I appreciate your appreciation for those two quotes, though, because I do think they're related in some ways. I looked at the "we want to be good enough to take advantage of bad football" quote as just another way of saying you first have to learn how not to lose before you can win. It's about managing mistakes. And if the other team makes more mistakes than you do, has more bad football, quote unquote, than you do, you're going to end up okay. And I think Mike Vrabel basically just tweaked an old Bill Belichick saying there and kind of made it his own. And the reason why I bring up Bill Belichick's name is because of that other quote, interesting versus important. That's how it came up in the press conference, where he's talking about how, to me, is it interesting that I worked for Bill and now I'm here and I'm back and I'm coaching the same team? Yeah. Is it important to our players? I'm not sure. What I would say is it is important. Because Mike Vrabel's identity as a coach is going to be inspired in some way, and I think a significant way, by Bill Belichick. And we heard a lot of Bill Belichick at the podium today. Bill Belichick's specter still looms over everything that's happening here. And so when he says it doesn't matter how you get here, it matters what you do when you got here, or we're going to rid entitlement of the building. These are the things that are essentially like on the front door when you're either entering or leaving the building for 20 years under Bill Belichick. Like, he feels the same way about the game in a lot of respects that Bill Belichick does. He's going to handle team meetings in a similar way to the way Bill Belichick did, as we learned from a very entertaining video from Taylor Lewan on X this past weekend, where he's talking to players and saying, your you-know-what holes are going to be real tight in those team meetings, because he's going to call on you and he's going to expect you to know certain people's names. He's going to expect answers on what the other team is doing depending on that week. And so he's very different from Bill. I would never say they are the same personality, but the way Mike Vrabel coaches, the hard coaching, the calling out players, the low-light videos, you're going to get a heavy dose of Bill Belichick during the Vrabel tenure here.
Interesting, but not important, is the fact that Bill and Mike are both only children. And, like, if you pay attention to stuff like birth order and sizes of families, I think only children, it's a very unique thing. And I've always thought it was very unique to Bill in the way he operated and interacted with people. Vrabel does it differently. But not only children are both of them, they're both the sons of educators. Bill's mother was a Spanish teacher, I believe.
French,
was it
maybe
French?
both.
Mike's parents were, I believe one was an administrator. I wrote a long feature on Mike back, I can't remember when. Might have been when he was going into coaching. Might have been when he was a player. Either way, I put some time into it. And, as one will do if they get along well with the person they wrote the feature on, they called their friggin' high school coach and everything. Hey, you get a chance to look at that? Yeah, thanks for doing it. Boilerplate, though. I said, what'd you say? He said, boilerplate. Yeah, I mean, call the coach. So, dink. What a dink. Anyway. So, yeah, I'm easily offended.
Only children, though. And he brought that up. That was like one of the first things out of his
I
mouth
loved
today.
it. I find it was fascinating because I find only children, and I got a brother, and we're very close, and you got two sisters, and I think your birth order, where you were born, I'm reading a book, The Prince of Tides, right now. Very good book by Pat Conroy. It has a lot to do with birth order and things like that. Anyway, I run far afield.
Did they use the word uncautious in that book?
Important, not interesting, perhaps. Probably not even interesting. But I think about that stuff and those links back to Bill, but I know that Mike is a dick, But I don't think that he's a dick to be a dick. I don't think it's a constant leverage play. I asked Josh Miller one time, Patriots punter when they won a Super Bowl in 2001. Great guy, and we were playing golf, and I asked him if he'd ever want to play golf with Bill. He goes, no. I said, why? He goes, he would spend the entire round, every time you looked up, he'd be looking at you, trying to figure you out. Because I don't need that. And Bill, it was always leverage, which was fun. It was fun to get leveraged. I got fed plenty of information as he was leveraging me, to the point where, okay, I got him on my team. Let me move on to the next guy. And Bill, anything? No, don't piss me off. Don't write anything I don't like. Anyway, I think Vrabel is different in the way he interacts with people in terms of, and we might find out differently, but in terms of the scorekeeping.
Oh, I think that's got to be true. I just can't imagine somebody of Vrabel's even generation. I don't know. And just his disposition, it's obviously very different from Bill's. And he was pretty open about that today, about how he doesn't want his interactions with the players to just be, a 2-minute, hey, how are you in the hallway? I mean, I don't know if he meant this at the time, but one of the things that sort of characterized Bill's interactions with players over the years here were his inability to interact with people in the hallways. Not for just 2 or 3 minutes, like for a second. Like, head down, focused on wherever he was going, focused on whatever it was he was thinking about at the time. He might not even look at you walking by in the hallway or in the locker room.
So that when the glance came, or the how'd your son do on that test I heard he was taking, it was like, oh my God! Everybody has him wrong.
He said hi to me.
He's the nicest guy.
So it's going to be very different. You're right about that. And I wonder how many of the players who are currently in the Patriots locker room
that's a guy.
will jive with his coaching style. Because when he said, we got to get entitlement out of the building, number
Who does
one,
he
that
mean?
means
That's what I wanted to ask.
He's
Who's
seen
he
it from
about?
afar, whether it's the quotes from Jelani Tavai or any number of the Patriots players that were sort of going at fans at the end of the season. Not a great look. Got a lot of publicity. Whether it's anybody in that receiver room that probably at some point during the season spoke out of turn, whether you think you got the best hands in the league or, you think you're a great player and, a quarterback should have thrown a little bit different place because then I would have been able to actually catch it instead of deflect it up for an interception as Kayshon Boutte did at the end of the season, kind of putting that one on Drake May and feeling totally in the right about that. There have been things that have happened in that locker room that just never would have happened 10 years ago in the same locker room. And I think that's what Vrabel's going to try to reestablish. But it might mean, Tom, an incredible amount of player turnover this year. And that's why I say 2 seasons. That's why, he might this entire year might just be about getting the right kinds of people into the building for him. And I don't know how many good players that's going to mean.
It's funny because I think their best players are their best people. I really do.
Drake May, Hunter Henry, David Andrews,
Kyle Duggar.
Mike Owenu.
Kyle Duggar gives a shit.
Kyle Duggar.
I think Bentley he'll be back, and I think that he's highly respected, well thought of.
Yep.
So that they're fortunate. Christian Gonzalez, they're fortunate in that
Yes.
Ramondre Stevenson is a good person.
Yeah.
Had some trouble with the football. Antonio Gibson, bring him back. Austin Hooper. There's plenty of players they can bring back. But to your point, unfortunately, they're not going from 8-8 to 5-11, but improving, which is what the 2000 Patriots did under Bill when he came in. New broom sweeps clean. They're already a 4-win team. So if new broom sweeps clean on a 4-win team, woohoo! But I don't think they're as bad as their record indicated. But
a lot of one-score games in there, right?
Yeah.
That you would think, maybe
Some game
Vrabel
management,
can help them with. Yeah,
Vrabel
sure.
and McDaniels or Tommy Reese, and who the hell is going to be the defensive coordinator? Do you have any inkling? And I got to jump in a second.
Shane Bowen apparently is somebody that he really likes and that people have thought would land with Vrabel wherever Vrabel ended up next, but it sounds like he's going to stick in New York. He's with the Giants, and that Giants staff ended up standing pat in New York. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be a legit search as opposed to some of these other jobs where whether it's Ryan
Yeah.
Cowden or offensive coordinator or whoever else that's going to be coming in here.
Dom Capers, always available. I'm kidding. He's just been kicking around since 2000 as a possible hire. They're going to bring Dom Capers and Tom Donahoe. I'm dating myself. Who else would be an interesting off-the-board defensive coordinator hire? Mike Zimmer? Oh!
That would be kind of fun. I was wondering if Pat Graham, remember old Pat Graham,
Yeah.
who was here in New England for a long time, has sort of bounced around. He followed Brian Flores down to Miami. He was the defensive coordinator in Vegas recently. They obviously just fired their head coach. So if he is without a job moving forward, he would be a qualified guy who has experience with the organization. Maybe Vrabel would like. I don't know.
All right. Hope you enjoyed the Mike Vrabel one-on-one. Hope you enjoyed Phil and my insight. Phil will have a next Pats. We will be back with you again Thursday of this week. We got quick slants tomorrow. Felt a little celebratory down there in Foxborough today. And I chalk some of that up to the fact that last year was just such a shock to the system to be post-Bill, and there was so much trepidation about Gerard's readiness. I think that, unfortunately, again, the more I think about it, every time I say something about good for Vrabel, I can't help feeling bad for Mayo. I got to be honest. Not that he did a bang-up job and definitely needed to be back, and I think they're probably heading in a better direction. I just feel like for the guy.
Agreed.
With that, see you later.